Hello. It's Holly Rustick here with Grant Writing and Finding. And I'm super excited today because I have on the show Miss Mazarine Treyz. Welcome, Mazarine.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Holly.
Yes, absolutely. And we are going to be talking about amazing things. But first, I want to introduce Mazarine a little bit for those of you who don't know her, because she is an author of 3 books. She is also a nonprofit leadership coach, speaker and best-selling author of The Wild Woman's Guide to Fundraising. And we're going to be talking a lot about women focused in here today. Loving it. And she works, she has her own podcast. You do so many different things in the nonprofit space, Mazarine. And we also connected here, just a little backstory, because we were talking about different points of feminism. And I was really, Sean Kasofsky, he kind of put us together. So for those of you guys listening or watching, you guys know Sean, he's been on the show before. And he said, oh my gosh, Holly, you got to talk to Mazarine. So I'm so glad that he connected us. And just welcome to the show again. Yes.
Oh, thank you. I am so happy he connected us too. Yeah, we actually, at my conference, the Party at the End of the Patriarchy, which is happening again in March 2022,
Okay.
I had a woman talk about feminist business models, and that was really exciting. And one of the key aspects of feminist business model is what you're doing right now, which is helping support another woman in business and, using your platform to help her have a voice. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And right back at you. I mean, this is really important. I know the further I've gotten in my business and worked through my own trauma and through with other women who have also seen, wow, you guys have similar trauma, and, being a part of the Women's Chamber of Commerce and other places where we're really working with a lot with women and saying, whoa, a lot of us have these systemic issues, then identifying them as systemic issues. They're not just like our own trauma. It's like, no, it's a part of the ecosystem that we're kind of born into, and that we all of a sudden need to be aware of so we can overcome it. And just those epiphanies and realizations for myself then have really helped me change the design for my life and talk to other consultants about changing their design, that it doesn't have to be the way that maybe we were raised to think it was, of less than, or feeling icky with our value or stuff like that. So I'm so glad that, we're on the same page with a lot of this, and that you do so much in this space to really, help women become aware and then move forward and have solutions. So it's really inspiring to me. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, where my heart is I love helping women ask for more. You really hit it. And I also love helping non-binary people ask for more. Generally, I think men don't need the help as much, but people socialize as men. But yeah, just to be clear, there's so many reasons why we don't. And there's so many reasons why we have this imposter complex. And as you said, the icky feeling.
Yes.
Oh, I can't ask for that. And I can go into detail about why we have that, or else let you ask questions, whatever you want.
Oh, awesome. I love that. Okay. So yeah, so for you guys out there, I know a lot of you guys are working in nonprofits, you're looking at, transitioning into becoming a freelance grant writer, a nonprofit consultant, or maybe you've been there for a while and you just kind of hit a plateau, right? And really feeling like, okay, as a woman, I know I feel like I should be ahead of where I'm at, maybe financially, maybe, owning my own, whatever, really I should be further, but why do I feel held back? So I really want to touch on kind of just the general sense first, and then we can go a little deeper.
Yeah, well, why do you feel held back in your work? That's what you're saying? Yeah. Whether you're a freelance grant writer or you're looking to take your business to the next level. I actually helped a grant writer this last year raise her rates 60%, and her clients didn't even blink. And that felt really good to me. And she'd been in business for a long time. And I, she was an older person, older than I was. And I was like, I wonder, what's up with that? Why do we have such a hard time? And I was actually studying with a wonderful person last year named Kaja Urbanik. And she taught me a lot about how to ask for more. And so these are the tools that I use to help women do that. A lot of the history and the backstory with that, I actually have this written down here, so I'm just going to go look at it. The reason why we do this to ourselves and why we accept less than we should is because, society was built on women's uncompensated labor.
Mhm.
I'm going to say it again. Society was built on women's uncompensated labor. So that value mindset and imposter syndrome is very common in women, because for years, I don't know about you, but in my family, we were told you have to work for free. You have to watch the kids. You have to care for the elders. You have to cook and you have to clean. And you do all of that for the love. Well, domestic labor is still labor. It's still work,
Yes.
right? But we were taught to devalue ourselves from a very young age. I'm the oldest of 25 grandchildren. Like, I never got compensated for my labor. And so my first nonprofit job I had, I was making $10 an hour. And that really wasn't feeding me. I was living on my credit card and I just couldn't believe I asked for so little. Now I routinely help people coming from the nonprofit sector charge, $300 plus an hour. And it's so renewing and refreshing to me to watch women grow that way, because we're leaving behind, we're breaking the spell of patriarchy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that image of breaking the spell, because it is. I mean, and for you guys that are listening to say, well, what, there's a difference between women and men getting paid? Yes. Okay, let's just start. Generally, it's like 81 cents per dollar. So for every woman that works, it only gets 81 cents per every dollar a man does. And that's just in general. That's not even like, let's get into the freelance grant writing. So let's get into the nonprofit business. And when it comes to women of color, it's only 63 cents per that dollar. So there's even greater gaps, right? And it's a very real, it's not just something dreamed up. I mean, we can just look back and say, we've only been voting for 100 years. Like, that is not long in the scheme of things for women, right?
That's right. And up until the 70s, women couldn't open a bank account by themselves. So women making great money with her emotional labor and the quality of her ideas is deeply subversive. I'm just going to quote Simone Grace Soul right now. She says, "Please remember all this the next time somebody finds issue with the very idea of you being well paid, or thinks you're charging too much, or says you should do what you do for free, or tries to get you to charge by the hour, or tries to police how you use your money, or in any way tries to link your money with a moral defect. Misogyny runs deep and wide. It's the air we breathe and the water we drink. It's often internalized and weaponized by women to be used against themselves or against each other. So when you see it, you can recognize it, have compassion for a collective wound, and lovingly, peacefully, and uncompromisingly set a new standard."
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
That's why I had to quote her. She's great.
Love that. It just came out too. I was like, this quote. I love it.
Oh yeah, well, I wrote it down.
Oh yeah. So it's funny that you say that, because and to really think about this, it's embedded, right? So even looking at, for instance, and the more you realize that it's embedded, you become aware, and that's such a powerful thing. So even like just my daughter at school, she goes to a private school, right? And they have to wear uniforms. So her uniform is obviously, it's a skirt, right? So it's like the shorts with the skirt thing over it. And I got to thinking, I said, honey, isn't it cold in your classrooms? Because the aircon, right, is blasting. She's like, yeah. And I said, and the boys wear pants. And why can't you? Why is there even different uniforms for men and, for boys and girls? Why is there even a differentiation? And it's just like, so you guys, it's such, so I said, does any of the other girls wear the pants? Oh, there's one girl. So I'm like, well, you got one girl who's brave because they can wear whatever you want, but it's like this social thing then that the other girls, they want to wear the skirts because it's like the social dress style. And it's just like, but is it comfortable? So I think even embedded in something that might seem so minute like that, it's everywhere when we really open our eyes. So, I mean, how do you encourage women when they're working in the nonprofit or they're a freelancer just to become more aware and that they have choice in those types of things as well?
Well, that key word you said there is choice. Every day you can wake up and make new choices. So the first time a woman said to her boss, I want a year off from my job. I want you to pay me while I have a baby. And then I want you to hold my job until I come back. She had to ask for that. That was something that helped millions of women after her have maternity leave. But she had to be the one to make the ask. And so if your daughter is cold in school, just going back to your example, could she be brave enough? And could you as your mom support her, right? Could you be brave enough to ask with her, can we just let boys and girls wear whatever they want, pants or a sport?
Mm-hmm.
And you could be helping so many girls no longer have cold, shivering legs. But more than that, you could be breaking that gender bias that says, you know, it's important to be uncomfortable in the name of your gender.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things I could say about that. Like, I've been attacked for my fashion at work. People who are like lawyers working at, you know, Harvard and Stanford have gone on strike and quit en masse because of what they call gender asbestos
Mm-hmm.
that they experienced at those colleges. And I have links that we can put in show notes and stuff like that about what that is, why that happens. Policing how you dress is just one part of the sexism puzzle, but it's also part of the racism and white supremacy puzzle, because who decided open-toe shoes were not professional? Who
Right.
decided that wearing a blazer and looking more masculine was more professional? Who decided that stewardesses had to wear makeup as part of their, you know, outfit?
Yeah.
You know, there's all this tax that you pay as a woman, and there's uncomfortableness and how you get judged that really adds up over time. So if we just unquestioningly accept that, we do it as a detriment to ourselves.
Right. No, and I love that. Yeah, it's like making the choice and looking at those things and realizing, like, yeah, why do they have to wear makeup? Why are they wearing blazers? And, you know, there's almost been this movement. I think a lot of it, I'm a Gen X, right? It's a lot, I've seen it a lot in my baby boomers, as well as my friend calls it, men with lipstick. So women taking on roles and kind of wearing those blazers, wearing, you know, being more aggressive, what they see men doing, who can move up, who can ask for raises. They kind of bring that same energy to a room, because that's the only example that they've really seen in a lot of cases, if they haven't seen women doing that. And, you know, that necessarily that could really backfire to a woman's energy, right, to move forward in that kind of masculinity way. So have you seen that as well? Like, has your experience been like that, men with lipstick kind of you know, way forward, that some women move forward in that way?
You know, I was talking with my aunt about this when I was in Florida a few earlier last week.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she said was, I don't blame women for wanting to act more like men, because there's such a cost to being a woman and also being, you know, feminine in this culture. One of the things that maybe you can relate to is moving to another culture and seeing femininity and masculinity and how they're displayed in that culture, and being an ethnic minority. And so when I moved to Korea, I really in South Korea, in Seoul, saw femininity and masculinity displayed in a really different way. And then I moved to Indonesia and I saw that displayed differently again. And so I had grown up on the East Coast, and I grew up with that same mentality of acting feminine, wearing makeup, or even just like not having that bro kind of attitude that we're rewarded for. I grew up with that as being like very much a part of how you should be as an East Coast New England woman. And then I went there and I came back and I said, none of this is set in stone. You know, there's a great strength in being feminine, as a great strength in challenging what we think about gender and sexism. And, you know, there's stages to our consciousness about this.
Yeah.
And I would like to reference the work of Dr. Debbie Jenkins, who I had on my podcast last year. And she talked about this in terms of racial awareness and racialized trauma. So we might also like to think about this as like gender trauma for ourselves, but men have this too, right? So she said, she calls it racialized categories and development. So you go from conformity, where you believe that men do everything right? And she said Black people are also in a space of conformity where they believe that white people do everything right. And then you go from dissonance, is where you're not sure if you've experienced a racialized experience. It's like Carlton on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He's arrested for driving a Mercedes. He kept saying, well, they must be pulled me over for a reason. It must have been because I was driving too slow. And his dad said, I used to think that too, son. He's trying to tell him, no, it's because you're Black.
Right.
So that's the dissonance. And then there's the immersion phase, where the person realizes now there's some social injustice, but their response is a little more frustrated. So realizing what is going on, right? And then there's the immersion phase, where you're basically in a space of, you know what, not only am I upset about this, but I only want to be around my people. I don't want to be around anybody else but my people. So, you know, you don't want to be around white people, you know, and There's this power and privilege and inequity. This is a system, it's strategic. So that's internalization. And, and then there's integrative awareness, which is, okay, you start thinking about your class status, where you're building up relationships with people in other groups, you're secure in your identity, you're clear about who you are, you're clear about not sacrificing yourself, you're not allowing people to tokenize you, otherize you, victimize you, to humanize you. None of that is being allowed because you're clear on who you are. So I dehumanize you. And at the same time, you're able to make strides for systemic change. So those are like, the 6 levels of where we might be, where some people who are listening or watching might be looking at, racialized awareness or, gender awareness.
Yeah, I love that system too, because like you said, you could be at different points in that system and not realizing there's another path beyond that, right? So kind of moving from path to path. And I think a lot of us have, been on that path or parts of it. And it's like, wow, really understanding and being like, oh, that's why I felt so connected to like the woman at that time, or you know what I mean, because that's the stage I was at. I wanted to be connected to my tribe. So it's like, moving through that. But that's a really, really cool way to look at it. And then just kind of relating all of this back then. So, we kind of looked at big picture and look at that some systemic issues, and then how we are navigating through those. And now to bring it back to the nonprofit world, as far as, because we do see a lot of gender discrimination in nonprofits. We see a lot of male executive directors, male presidents of the board. We see a lot of higher paid men, et cetera. There's a lot going on there. So for a woman who may be working at a nonprofit at this point in time and being like, you know what, I've been number 2 for a long time, like, the runner up to the executive director, if you will, but doing a lot of his job, but, not getting paid for it, those types of situations, because I actually see that quite a lot. So how could you encourage her? Like, what would be a step to ask for more? Like what you started off, kind of saying, like, how can she get out of feeling like, oh my gosh, now I realize this is a bigger issue than me, but I do have a choice, but what do I do?
Yeah, so when I was talking about white supremacy just now and racialized categories, that's still very much within the context of nonprofits, just to be clear.
Yeah.
We have a system that is broken, whether you're working in government, corporations, or nonprofits, and it's all based on white supremacy. And it's based on colonialism. And it's based on patriarchy, and it's based on capitalism, right? So everything I'm saying has immediate relevance for you if you're working in a nonprofit or working with nonprofits as a consultant. So that might be why people are devaluing your work, whether you're inside or outside, right? And it might be also why you're just not getting where you want to be. And so nonprofits are often toxic pit holes of racist, workplace culture. And so we really need to ask ourselves, hey, if I'm not getting a fair shake here, where can I get a fair shake? And some people say, oh, consulting is too precarious. And to that I say, working for someone is precarious. So I just worked with a woman this last week who was trying to leave her nonprofit job, and then she got pushed out, and then she immediately got another interview and got $5,000 more. We worked together to get her a raise. And so we worked really hard to show her she had this value, because she is underpaid for so long at a national organization I will not name, but they are just notorious for paying their workers so little and saying, well, we just don't negotiate salaries here, or it's just not in the budget.
Right.
So I have phrases you can use to overcome that. But one of the things that unfortunately a lot of people have to remember when you're working full-time at a nonprofit is, if you've been accepting a low wage for a long time, they might only ever see you as that person, and you're going to have to make a lateral move. But by that, I mean, apply for another job, get that job, and negotiate a higher salary there, because the people who are around you right now clearly do not value you.
Okay.
And if you think no one's going to pay me $300 an hour, Mazarine, I'm like, yes, they will. They will. There's over 1 million nonprofits in this whole country. There absolutely are people that are willing to pay you more. And even if you've been charging less as a consultant or as an employee, it's all about asking. And I have key phrases you can use either at annual review time or in your job, application process, or as a consultant to get more. And that's kind of what I do in my mastermind. And we have about 5 spaces left in that. If people want to learn about that, we can put that link in the show notes too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's very, very insidious. Women do it to other women. But I did a survey with Bloomerang for 2 years in a row, one in 2019 and one in 2017, where we looked at 1,000 different nonprofit workers, and each one of them, no matter how many years of experience they had, the men were making more. So don't tell yourself, I don't have enough experience to make more. Don't tell yourself, I don't have the right degree to make more. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, how do you value yourself, and how can you take action on that new value that you're putting on yourself, even if you fake it till you make it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I love that you mentioned that, because part of it's too, if we look at this as a huge gender discrimination, like systemically, maybe you aren't getting as much experience even compared to a man because he has more opportunities, and it's the boys club, right? For a lot of these things. So it is to say, no, you can step into your own, and you can still, like, I like the fake it till you make it, but also, you know, the value that you put into things. Women are doing so much more in a lot of cases compared to men in a lot of these jobs. But are you documenting it? Are you really, you know, keeping track of that too, to understand the experience that you actually are getting? Because a lot of times that goes to that imposter syndrome, right? Like not even realizing all of the worth that you have, and all of the experience you really do have. But writing that down can help you identify that, and to remember it, and to be like, oh yeah, I did do this, right? So I love that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you did. Not only did you do it, you did it so well that, you know, other people should be singing your praises. And when they're not, you start to doubt yourself. You start to say, why didn't I get a raise? I raised all this money for them. Like I was working as a development director at the Urban League in 2009. I went from making them $7,000 in grants to making them $120,000 in grants in 1 year, on top of running a humongous dinner with hundreds of people attending, getting all these sponsorships, going from 150K to 250K without even a loan, and running a career fair. I mean, I was doing so much for them, and my boss was not acknowledging it. And he was routinely making people, including me, cry. And so for people who are in a hot mess of a situation, I am living proof, and so are my clients. You can get out of those situations, and you can actually thrive way harder without them, even if you're afraid to leave. So one of the reasons that you might be feeling like stuck there, and why you might be devaluing yourself, are like, you know, the 12 different aspects of white supremacy culture, taken from dismantlingracism.org, Jones and Okune's work. I highly suggest you go to dismantlingracism.org and download the PDF, but here's what they are. Perfectionism. So you think if you didn't do something perfectly, oh, it's not, just throw it out, right? Sense of urgency. Well, with grants, we already know that happens a lot, but like your boss saying, you know, you have to do this by the end of the year or you're a terrible person. That's a sense of urgency, right? Defensiveness. Oh no, we can't tell you how much other people are making, right? Oh, men are making more, we don't want to tell you that. Like, I'm super defensive about that, right? Quantity over quality. How many grants did you get out this week? What if you got out a really big government grant?
Yeah.
That's worth way more than 3 little ones for $5,000 each, right? Worship of the written word. If it's not written down, it never happened, right? Only one right way. That's not true. That is never true. There's always tons of ways to do things right. But in grant writing too, they're all like, make a replicable program because there's only one right way to do it. Like, and you know that the reason your program is so successful is because you have the right people in there, and that's not replicable. You know what I mean? Paternalism, which is, I know better than you because I'm a white cis woman, or I am a white cis man, right? And that's part of colonialism. Like, we're gonna help the brown people or the black people do something in their lives that's better than they could do alone because we are white and therefore better, right? So that's people giving you unasked for advice and blah, 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 right? Either or thinking, either you're with us or against us. Don't criticize the nonprofit. You're either with us or against us. Like, no, we can still criticize it and love the mission. Power hoarding, like you were mentioning, these guys at the top of these organizations not wanting to give up power, whether it's on the board or EED. Fear of open conflict. What is it that's keeping you from asking for more? Is it fear of open conflict? Maybe
I see a lot of that.
Right? Me too. And I've been there myself, and it's very white culture thing. And so you can be like, no, I'm going to actually ask, why don't I have more? And if they can't give me a good answer, I'm going to look for a new job tomorrow, you know? Individualism, like, oh, well, you know, you can't tell everybody that we're doing this, like, you know, you have to do it all yourself. You don't have to you can't have any help. You know what I mean? Progress is bigger and more. You need to like make more and more grants every year. That's the hedonic treadmill. It's like, did you give me more money for my budget? No, then why should I be making more? You know, objectivity is a myth. That's brought up only when people don't want to hear what you have to say. They're like, oh, I'm objective, I'm logical. No, you're not. You're just as emotional as everyone else. You're always making decisions from your gut, whether or not you acknowledge it. And there's scores of studies that support that. And finally, right to comfort. So a lot of times when you're branded the problem in your organization or in your family or whatever, it's because people who are white or who are, you know, brainwashed by white culture, white supremacy culture, think that they have a right to comfort. And if you say something that disturbs them, you're automatically wrong or bad, even if you're talking about a problem that really should be resolved, because they're losing people, they're losing money, they're losing funders, and they don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? So those are the 12 aspects. And just to not depress you, you know, we have these inside of ourselves as well as outside our organizations. But if you want antidotes to these, if you go to dismantlingracism.org, Okun lists antidotes to all of these so that you can start shifting this in your workplace processes and inside yourself. And I think it's really important to like think about, this is not a hopeless cause, but we have to break that spell to be able to even see that it's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you pointed out each one of those, because those are all, you know, things I see, you know, a lot of the women, they struggle with a lot is, you know, even, you know, if they're a freelancer and I've got to get my website absolutely perfect before I launch it, I'm like, it's never going to be perfect.
Never, ever, ever.
It's always like done is better than perfect, right? So
same for grants. Done is better than perfect. It's not going to be perfect. What if you're just spelling mistake? Oh no.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? There's going to be like mess ups, and that's okay. But it's more about getting things out, getting things, you know, just manifested and done, right? So it definitely is, but a lot of that holding back, that perfection, that, you know, I love all the different things that you're looking at too, is to say, am I struggling with this? Am I seeing myself projecting on some of these things as well? Am I trying to give advice where I shouldn't be necessarily giving advice, right? Like a lot of, I see nonprofits doing, I also worked in Indonesia, and I saw a lot of that after the Asian tsunami, where, you know, big organizations just swept in and said, we white people know what you need. And they were like, no, that's not exactly what we need, but we're going to kind of play along with it just so we get money. Like I saw a lot of that, which I thought was actually, you know, it's pretty smart. They're like how they deal with it, right? So,
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see that oh, there's a need and I know how to fix it. And it doesn't necessarily come from a place of nefarious, or there's nothing like that. Sometimes it's well-intentioned, but it's just gone about in the wrong way, right? So,
well, I mean, intentions are not impact, and we have to keep remembering that. So if somebody says your impact was colonial, your impact was white supremacist, know that it's not personal. You're a product of the system.
yes.
And we're here to fight and hold systems accountable. We're not here to fight individuals per se.
Yes.
Because the individual is a product of the system.
Yeah.
And I had to learn this pretty hard this last year when I was giving advice to people in my racial equity class. I was like, oh, I really am tied into offering so many resources and trying to prove my value, because I was taught that is my role. That's how I get value as a person, if I overgive, which is a codependent response. So understanding that your family of origin stuff can affect how you move through the world and how you overgive, or how you assume power and control. And it's all about how power obscures itself, right? Setting yourself up as an expert means that you are in some ways seeking power. And you sometimes don't think that people of color have, or people from the global majority have the right tools to succeed because of who they are. So if you want to decolonize your mind and decolonize your nonprofit, you might ask yourself, how can we involve community members more in these decisions that we're making? And before offering advice, ask for permission. Can I give you some advice? Or do you want any advice right now, or do you want me to just listen?
I love that.
You know?
Yeah. And that's, I'm so big on like doing strengths assessment, you know, not just needs assessments, but going out there and doing focus groups and inviting people in, and, you know, and just sitting back and really listening to the conversations. And then that way you're really seeing the need. So yeah, it's an interesting, I like that decolonize the nonprofit, decolonize the mind. And yeah, and just to kind of segue then into, so we talked about, being maybe in a place of work, potentially moving laterally, if you're really not feeling like you're getting the value, because you might not get the value that you really deserve or earn, right? Like have, if you're at that same place that's been paying you so low for so long. And I thought that was such a good, something really interesting that you said on that, because that's the other thing too, is you can't just keep fighting it if you've been devalued for that long. There is that perception then, right? And it's really hard to break that, but I like just change the place then laterally and demand some more from there. And that's going to be a new start. And that's even with freelancers. So as we kind of segue into freelancers, then a lot of people out there, grant writers, nonprofit consultants, they're like, okay, I saw that was going on in my nonprofit. So I decided to open up my own place because I know I can make more money, right? I know I can have more value there. So that's a lot of people I see that's how they kind of transition in sometimes, is because they were fired or they quit. They were like, I'm done and I'm going to start up, right? And sometimes they're like, I applied for jobs and just didn't get them. So this was the only choice, right? And that's kind of, and then they look at that and they say, all right, so now I need to structure my week and I need to work 40 hours a week and I need to like be on during these times and da, 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 da. So it's kind of like bringing that kind of, system into your own place. And that kind of goes with that decolonizing the mind, because then we're just replicating what we were trying to get away from. So can you kind of speak a little bit?
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought this up. There's a Instagram account called Decolonize Time. Mm-hmm. And it asks us, like, why are we so completely hostage to these little numbers on our screens that say this is the time, this is how much time you have to have, and spend most of your time working, because otherwise if you don't have enough money, you're a failure. So you really have to do the inner work of decolonizing and the outer work of decolonizing, or you could say breaking the spell of white supremacy at the same time. Mm-hmm. Whether you're doing it inside or outside. If you only do one, the other one isn't naturally going to follow. The key here is willingness. How willing are you to break down your beliefs in these structures? And, as Anjali Nathapadier said in her podcast, Feral Visions, how can you exercise that muscle of letting go of what no longer serves you? Just be like, peace out. You know what? Peace out with the nonprofits that don't value me, all of that. But if you're trying to recreate these systems and say, if I'm not working 40 hours a week, I don't have any value, that doesn't make any sense. A lot of us turn to this because we're single moms, or because we have just other things we want to do other than work our whole lives. And so for us, the payoff is worth it. So how do you feel? I mean, I think what you're asking is, how do you feel productive enough to actually make your business go without replicating the old system you came from?
Yes.
Yeah. So that according to the book, Laziness Does Not Exist, mm-hmm. and Work Won't Love You Back. One is by Dr. Devin Price, and the other one is by Sarah Jaffe. And I can put those in an email to you as well. You can listen to some podcast interviews by them on the Upstream podcast. It's very interesting. But one of the things that they talk about in their books, which are on my top 5 books of the year, is who decided we had to do a 40-hour work week at all? Yeah. Like, what if, studies have shown that human beings, even if they're working in a factory, are at most productive for 3 to 4 hours a day tops. Mm-hmm. So other countries right now are having great success with doing a 4-day work week, a 3-day work week. In France, if you have a government job, the police get on the phone at 4:30 if you're on the phone, and they say, get off the phone. So like, there's plenty of people saying, we refuse to let you work as hard as you think you need to, because literally it's killing you, it's killing the planet. And there's lots of articles from The Guardian about this as well, about if we want to save the planet, we need to stop commuting and we need to stop like working this hard. So, futurists from the 50s said, well, by the 2020s, we're going to have people who hardly have to work at all. But because of capitalism, and specifically because of like this predatory system we currently have, it's much better for the system if we are stressed out, burned out, and making all this money for corporate overlords, right? So one of the best ways to unplug yourself from the system is ask yourself, like, you know, just tell yourself work won't love me back.
Yeah.
And I need to prioritize my relationships right now and my people in my life that I love, my things that make me feel alive, and just keep doing those, because that's how you unplug from this whole machine.
Mhm.
It's like there's stuff that you cannot buy with money, and there's systems of community care and solidarity economy that will never be measured by any of their clocks and any of their you know, grant proposals. It's really about taking care of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You know, it reminds me of the interview I did with Vule from AF Nonprofit, and he was talking about, he was talking about, you know, get rid of the whole grant writing process. Like his whole thing was like, you know, foundations should just be like, here's a 2-page, you can use it any foundation, any funding source, and that's it. Like, why do we have to work so hard and go through all these and spend all our time and our capacity by going through these jumping around through hula hoops and all the things, right? You know, it's like spinning on our toes and tapping our heads and all of that just to get some money that we might not even be able to spend well, because, you know, it's the whole process is even just a nightmare. And I had to agree with him to be like, even though this is my grant writing and funding podcast, like we're teaching how to write grants and all that, but it's still like the process itself and the whole system, there's an issue with it, right? So it's really is, I like that unplugging the mind and unplugging from that system. You know, one of the things, and just kind of circle back to my daughter real quick, one thing I've really been looking at, my mom, she's an educator for a long time, has been really looking at our schools in Finland and really looking at the whole, you know, different types of education system, because my daughter just did a speech yesterday on why they should not have homework and why it's so detrimental to children's health and everything. She's 10. She said the whole class was like, yes. And she used Finland as an example. Yeah, and she was saying, you know, compared to only 20 hours of school per week, and we look at ours as like 35 hours of, you know, school per week, and we don't have as much playtime, et cetera. So our minds don't really have the opportunity to grow in certain ways. And I was like, wow, you know, that's so cool to see her even understanding that at such a young age, of course, right? But even our education system, I think a lot of it comes from there, like how we're raised in the system of standardized test of, oh, my worth is in this grade. That's just, you know, on some weird metric anyways. So
yes, so I actually have something about that I think your listeners and watchers will find very interesting. There's this thing called The Different Kind of Teacher by the 7 Lessons of School. And John Taylor Gatto wrote it. And so the 7 Lessons of School, he was basically a 30-year veteran of New York City public school system. And when he was getting his award for his lifetime achievement, he said, I don't actually teach English. Here's what I did teach though. He said, I teach emotional dependency, which is your opinion of yourself doesn't matter. Your parents' opinion of you doesn't matter. What matters is outside strangers. Their opinion of you is what matters the most. And so your teacher's grade on the test is what matters, right?
yeah.
I teach confusion, when the lesson of the bells is every time the bell rings, we have to turn to something else, even if we're really interested in what we're doing, you know? And so you don't get to choose what you work on. And that's indifference. That gives you indifference to all of your lessons, because you're not allowed to choose like a year-long project. You're not allowed to choose like job shadowing. You're not allowed to choose like community service. You can't choose. You just have to do reading, writing, and arithmetic. And he's like, what we do is a great lie. He's like, this system was created by people in the 1800s, childless men who wanted to create good industrial workers. And so some more than 7 Lessons of School are, you know, class position. That doesn't matter. Your permanent record doesn't exist, right? But that's another tool of control. Yeah. And he also puts in, you know, intellectual dependency. You don't have any time outside of homework and school and activities to actually pursue what you're interested in. Same for today's jobs, right? And then emotional dependency, like, you know, if you're not doing well in school, you should feel like a bad person. It's like, again, that's preparing us for this world of work that we can't separate our selfhood from. And finally, one can't hide, like, and provisional self-esteem. So can't hide. You have to get a pass to go to the bathroom, right? They pat you down for guns in a lot of schools. Like, it's ridiculous, like, so we can break these patterns, but first we have to know that we're caught up in them.
Right.
So if your readers want to learn about the 7 lessons of school, there's a website I can add to the show notes as well. So
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, because I really, as we look at it, there's all different ways of how we've kind of been raised in this culture. And of course, education is it's a big one, because that's, we're brought up, right? We spend so much time in these schools. And it's just like, what are we really learning? And, the more
that's what we're learning.
Yeah. It's just like, wow. So really looking at that and saying there's got to be different ways. And then when you look at different countries, like you even said with the work week and everything, there are different examples out there, right, that we can model or we can pull from. And it was interesting because even Finland was saying, well, some of the concepts were actually from America, more of that democracy, but it's not actually being used in the United States, even though some of the concepts might have been developed there. So it's kind of interesting, they're like actually really doing it. So, but yeah, I mean, looking at that is just, to be aware that a lot of these outside processes, external things that we've been raised in have developed us then to maybe not ask for that raise, to feel inadequate, to feel like maybe it's not my place, or to not like conflict because of that. Or when you're as a freelancer, you think I've got to work harder than everybody else because I've got to put food on my table. And that can be a really, really real fear, right? So understanding that as well, to say, no, you can redevelop and redesign and not charge so low to try to get jobs. Then if you're charging really low, you're going to take on a lot more clients to pay the bills. And you are going to be caught up in this cycle again. So is that kind of, as far as that freelancer, example, is that one thing or anything else that you would recommend to freelancers, not just to increase prices, but what are other things they can do so they're not caught up in that, like, I got to work my ass off 24/7 cycle?
Yeah. Acknowledge first that your mind has been colonized. Acknowledge first that your mind has been constantly swept in the patriarchal soup that we call society. Every time you look at a bus ad, every time that you look at the internet, every time that you look at the TV set, or even popular books and novels, or the newspaper websites, you're going to be finding a lot of support of that. So get in there and clean out what you look at. I've made it a point to only read female authors for the last several years, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. The protagonists are fantastic. The people, the stories they're fascinating, and you just sort of unplug your mind from certain aspects bit by bit. I try to only recommend female artists to people, or female musicians to people. I try to work with women and support women and uplift other women's voices. And so for the last, 5 years, I've been doing online conferences and interviewing people as well since 2015 on and just interviewing women and uplifting women's work and women's voices, because for me that's important to live my values that way. And if you are a consultant and you're afraid that you're not going to have enough support as a consultant, I say give other people what you would like to receive. If you want support, offer support to others. And you're never going to be alone. And all of these other guys in the old boys club, they didn't make it alone. That individualism is a myth.
Yes.
It's a myth that we break together right here and right now. And if you want to learn more about how to ask for more in your business and to have project rates instead of hourly rates, that's what I help people do. We rehearse these conversations until you get your mindset right and you feel confident that you can do it. And mindset is a whole other piece. We could talk for an hour just on mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe for several episodes on mindset. Actually, it's an ongoing process. It's about freeing your own mind from everything the world is telling you. It's just the enemy is in here as well as out there, so. But the good news is you don't have to be perfect. You just have to take the first step.
Yes, I love that. And I thank you so much. So this has been such an awesome podcast. I'm so excited. we talked about like big, but then we also got in the nitty gritty on specific examples. So I really appreciate that. And I really want people, if they're interested then, and how do I have that conversation? I want to prep that conversation with Mazarine. Like, how do they get a hold of you? Where do they find you?
So go to mazarinetreyz.com/work-with-me, and we can put that link in the show notes. It's work-with-me, or you know, mazarinetreyz.com. I'm not going to spell it for you. Hopefully it's right on the show notes, whatever, or the name of the podcast. But you can just go right to my Work With Me page and click the link, and you can set up a consult free of charge, and then we can see where we go from there. But as I said, I'm looking for 5 more people in my mastermind, and it can take a whole year before you feel ready to say, yeah, I want to ask for $75,000 a year for a part-time job. And I just helped a woman get that like 2 months ago. So nice. That's possible for you as a consultant to have that, and it's all possible. It's just a question of, you know, allowing yourself, feeling it, knowing it, having the community of other women around you to be like, yes, you can do this. Drip feeding yourself those little successes. And that's what we do, so that you get out of this mindset of nothing is working to like, oh, it's all working. It's all always working. And I'm quoting here Julia Wells, who has her own podcast, which we don't have to go to right now. So anyway.
I love that. So I love that people can find you, they can work with you, they can be in your mastermind. So you have multiple ways of how people can be served with you and to kind of further their journey on as far as stepping into their own. And I love that, because a lot of times it's, you know, we look at, especially we see a lot of these products, it's like, do this exactly like this cookie cutter template, and then X will happen. And it's like, that's really not the case. We're also different. We all have different desires of how we want our lives to be shaped. That what works for you might be a good example and inspiration for me, but I still need to tune in. I still need to figure out what my values are and to move forward in how I want to design my life. So I love that you work with people. So, you know, intimate, right? In an intimate way where you can get to those, like, let's see how this can work for you. So masterminds, I'm a huge fan. I love that you're doing that. And I love that you have coaching and you have the ability to really work with people in designing their destinies and really moving forward and breaking the spell. So thank you so much, Mazarine, for being on the show today.
Thank you for helping people break the spell, Holly. Thank you for having me. Like, we can all be spell breakers. I mean, this is how we're going to survive this time. This is how we're going to thrive, is if we all support each other. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on the Grant Writing and Funding podcast and YouTube channel. So we will definitely have you back on, and definitely, guys, check out the show notes. I have all of the links. You guys are going to want to see everything Mazarine does and be in her world, because she's amazing. So thank you again.
Thank you.